Okay, so I guess before I do my thing, it's important for me to say the subject of data correction and validation is pretty broad. And I have a lot to say about that subject, about understanding data, understanding what it means, if you use data, how to clean it, understand the recency, disclosing the sources of it, and all that kind of good thing, good kind of practices surrounding data. But that's actually not the subject of this panel, as you've heard from the panelists. We're focusing on invalid traffic associated with data, and that's what I'm focusing on too, since we're talking about invalid traffic. The MRC has done, I'm George Ivie, I'm with the Media Rating Council in the US, and we're sort of a governing body in the US that looks at media measurement. And we have written a set of guidelines around invalid traffic detection and filtration. That's new. We put it out in 2015. It was an enormous amount of work. There were over 200 companies involved in the project team. It took a couple years to build. And it really is bringing up to date original guidance that we put out when we first wrote internet measurement standards back in the early 2000s. When we first wrote those standards, we had a couple of sentences in those standards, because you can imagine sitting around in 2001 and 2002, nobody was really talking much about invalid traffic. So we put a sentence or two in those guidelines that say, you should filter measurement data to exclude traffic that's not human. But we basically left it at that. And now what's happened is that this issue, as you've heard from our previous panelists, has gotten extremely complex. So we had to catch up with that issue, and that's what we spent the last couple of years doing. Our focus is not about everything, but it's about ensuring measurement quality, measurement of audiences, measurement of traffic. So we wrote this standard, and the purpose was really to modernize and strengthen the requirements for removing invalid traffic applicable to all measures that are accredited by the Media Rating Council. That's a lot of measures. We conduct over 110 audits of products a year. So everyone who measures digital traffic, we're forcing essentially to comply with this set of guidelines. Another thing that this set of guidelines does is it enables companies that focus in this area, that do things like sophisticated invalid traffic removal, to actually come to the MRC and get validated for that. And as it says at the bottom of this slide, we have several vendors that are at our doorstep looking for us to audit them for invalid traffic detection and filtration. And that's really difficult. So how much invalid traffic removal is enough? It's a tough audit problem that we've been working on literally for years. The guideline that we wrote has several subjects in it, many of which are brand new. It requires a new and much more intensive structure of internal controls at a measurement organization focused on removal of invalid traffic. It defines brand new organizational functions around that are mandatory to be present at a measurer. Building on the old language we have put out in the early 2000s, it significantly expands the guidance around what's required to remove invalid traffic and the protection measures. It also addresses what should be disclosed about invalid traffic. If you're removing invalid traffic, you should be telling people how much of it you're removing in certain instances. And something we had never addressed before, but it builds in certain types of communication requirements among the media ecosystem. So at a certain level, we should all be learning from each other about this invalid traffic, particularly the easier stuff that Michael mentioned. We should be sharing information with each other so that we kill that. And we're leveraging organizations like TAG in the United States to help us with that. So there are a lot of expanded concepts, partner qualification, not being able to delegate your responsibility as a measurer for removing this stuff, and the advanced practices that are in these guidelines. They're very, very difficult to comply with. It requires processes that are dynamic and continuously learning, because the bad guys do this for a living, and they're continuously changing. So we have to at least make an effort to keep up with them. And it focuses on not just identifying traffic, but filtering it. So it's no longer good enough just to say, well, I'm seeing this. You have to remove it from counts. Now that sounds stupid to even say, like, why would you remove invalid traffic? Obviously you have to, but we definitely formalized and codified the requirements to remove it. As Michael mentioned in his earlier slide, we've sort of invented a couple of different types of invalid traffic. The general stuff, AKA the easier stuff, that everyone really should be able to detect. We're requiring every measurer to do those, and they're very sort of generalizable. They're based on lists and other generalizable procedures. So every measurer should be able to remove that, and they should be roughly comparable in their efforts to remove that type of traffic. What that does is preserve the comparability of measures at that level once they've removed the general stuff. Then there will be a few organizations, and I want to emphasize that not everybody will be able to comply with this, but there are a few organizations that are technically qualified to remove sophisticated invalid traffic, and they'll be an add-on essentially, and they'll be able to remove things like the adware, the machine takeovers that Michael was talking about, et cetera, these are really difficult to detect. You have to have wide views of the internet, metadata analysis, very sophisticated types of analyses to detect these techniques. Just at the bottom, I want to emphasize again, all measurers, everyone that's accredited by MRC, and if you use data, you should be asking everyone, even if they're not audited by us, to remove general invalid traffic. The other thing you should do if you're a user or on the client side, you should look for somebody to remove the sophisticated traffic for you, because it's a big, big issue. If you don't think you have it, you're wrong. It's a big issue. That's it. Happy to answer questions. We'll turn over the panel. This is my contact information. If you want to learn more about the standards, go to our website, etc. Look forward to talking to everyone.